Hi, everybody. How are you doing? It's great to be back, and it's so nice that I get to speak with a guest from the past and someone that I really just think is very, very intelligent and always has really cool things to say in her videos and on Twitter, Miss Greta Aurora. Hi. And so today we're going to continue talking about a subject that has been really important to both of us and a number of you are interested in, and that's the Marilyn Manson situation. Now, we have both in our videos gone over our opinions on this case before, and so you can look at those if you have any questions about where we stand and so forth. But what we wanted to do today actually is provide a kind of a character study on the main accuser, especially Evan Rachel Wood, and we'll also talk about some of the others as well. Esme Bianco is also someone who's been in the news, the press a lot. And so I think that looking at one of the best ways of doing this is to look at interviews that people have done themselves, right? That you get primary sources, and that's really helpful. So we have gathered some of those together. And so, Greta, I guess let's get going. What did you want to look at first?
So the first two videos I'd like to start with. One is from a film festival where she was interviewed one-on-one, and then the second one is a talk she gave at a human rights event where she was presented with this visibility award for being bisexual. I'd like to point out some interesting inconsistencies, and I think she contradicts herself a lot across these two videos and the statements she makes. So the first one is from this film festival about a year ago, just over a year ago, I think.
Hi, and thanks for coming. I remember you from Touched by an Angel.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was a great performance.
Wow.
But you mentioned that in Once and Again, you were going through conversations about your sexuality.
Uh-huh.
And I remember that we weren't really seeing a lot of young characters like that. So what was the conversation with the producers, directors saying, can you bring this forward? Because you did a great job.
Thanks.
You and Misha Burton. So what was that conversation?
We were the youngest same-sex kiss on television at the time. Yeah. And that episode was also banned in West Virginia. They were not allowed to air it. Woohoo!
Just in West Virginia?
Yeah. Yeah. But it's amazing to experience that as a teenager and then kind of see where we are now and how television's changed so much. It's really cool. It might not seem like we're making progress, but we are slowly. The producers called me and my mother into the office and sat us down and just said, we're thinking of having Jesse get a crush on a girl. And I think we were, again, a pretty open-minded household. They were theater actors, so this is not shocking to them. And my mom was really supportive. Honestly, I have to give a shout out to my mom at this as well, because I have been doing this since I was 5, and she drove me everywhere, stayed on set with me, drove me to the auditions. She was an acting coach, and she allowed me to do these roles, and these, she didn't judge, and she understood the gravity of them, and she understood why they were important. So, while I'm doing Once and Again and 13 and stuff like that, like, my mom was right there, but also letting it happen and letting me do that. And so I have to kind of give it up to her too for that.
So she was 13 when she appeared in this episode. And then 3 years after this, she filmed the movie 13, where she played a 13-year-old, but she was really, I think, 15 or 16 at the time. Right. And there's a lot of experimentation in that film. I haven't actually seen the whole thing, but I've seen scenes from it. So there's a lot of drugs and partying. And there's a bit of commentary on same-sex attraction too. I don't think there are any lesbian scenes, but it's all about the teenage angst. So there must have been, at the time, there must have been a lot of conversations around these difficult phases these teenagers go.
Exactly. In fact, so I have seen 13, but I watched it years ago, like after it came out, because it was getting so much acclaim for being this edgy portrayal of teenagers. I mean, that was the whole sort of like rationale of the film in a way, and to show like the gritty stuff that was going on in some adolescent girls' lives.
So the second clip I wanted to show is from this award ceremony where she was presented with this visibility award by the Human Rights Campaign, which is apparently the largest LGBTQ advocacy group and political lobbying organization in the United States. So they were celebrating her for being open about her bisexuality.
Growing up, I thought that I was like every other girl. I didn't realize that there was anything that would have been considered different about me until I was 12 years old, right around when puberty and sexual feelings started to take over, and I felt something that I couldn't explain. And it was something that made my throat close up and my stomach clench, something that made my mouth go dry and my pulse race. And it was something so simple, yet so terrifying. I thought women were beautiful. And I had no way to put what I felt into words. I had no role model. No one I knew was talking about it. I wasn't exposed. So the only thing that I knew was fear and confusion and loneliness. How can you be who you are when you don't understand what you're feeling? And the more I kept silent, the more my self-esteem got lower and lower and lower. And then one day, I heard an actress say the word bisexual. And I thought, what the hell is that? And when I found out, a light bulb went off. The word didn't make me feel marginalized. It made me feel less crazy. It made me feel less alone. It gave me hope. An actress just said a word, but it made a world of difference in my life and in my identity. As an actor, my job is to look at a stranger and find myself in them, to connect the dots, to have such empathy for a character that I can read someone else's words and be moved to tears, turning empathy into vulnerability. And it was the best therapy and outlet for my silenced voice. I could throw on a mask and say all the things I always wanted to say, but never could. And it wasn't until I saw the effect that it had on other people that I really started to see how powerful allowing your most vulnerable parts to be seen was. I saw another side to what I did, and it was the power of visibility. I realized that every time I had reached out my hand to someone through a song or a performance of mine, I was also reaching for someone's hand. I see you, you see me, we aren't so different. And through that connection, the healing begins. Last year, on June 10th, 2016, I was reading some pretty startling statistics about bisexuals and bisexual youth that the Human Rights Campaign had released. I wasn't startled because I was surprised. I was startled because it was like reading an autobiography. Statistics about suicide, addiction, sexual harassment, rape, and intimate partner violence specifically rang true for me. And I racked my brain as to why. Why were bisexuals so susceptible to these kinds of things? And I figured there was no better person to ask than myself. And the only answer that I could come back with was self-esteem. There was shame about what I felt and how I identified, from outside the community, and unfortunately, as well as in at times. There was misinformation and what seemed to be a competition of suffering. I felt denied the right to suffer, and more importantly, denied the need to connect through that suffering. It's one of the main things that connects us, but how do you measure it?
So She's obviously presenting her situation in an overly dramatized manner, and she's making such a big deal out of being bisexual. Like, do you actually believe much of what she's saying here?
You know, I'm glad that you brought this clip up because I feel like I've watched this. I know I've watched this before, but I guess now that I'm really focused on it, it's just I see a lot of like just kind of lunacy in it. I don't mean that I think saying she's literally crazy, but I mean like this very, very strange. There were certain things, especially she said she seemed really focused on this idea that she has been silenced. And it's all of these words that are so popular now in these kinds of like Me Too and even social justice narratives at times, where it's about like I've been marginalized. She said marginalized, silenced. But then when she said I felt like I had been denied the right to suffer and the need to connect through that suffering. That is a very strange thing to say. That you have been. I mean, I understand. I know what she's consciously saying or trying to say there. But to say I've been denied the right to suffer, and to connect with others. To me, that tells me that if I were a psychoanalyst who was just had her on the couch as a patient, I would say, you know, my interpretation would be that this is someone who is very much tied to her pain and to really kind of wallowing in it, and also the fact that she said is suffering is how we connect to other people, basically. I mean, that is definitely someone who in a relationship is going to be really a problem to be with, someone who feels that connection comes through suffering. I mean, that's how I would read all of that. So I bet there were other things too, but I don't know. What did you notice?
Well, she likes presenting herself as this tortured soul, this tortured artist. And
Yes.
at the same time, she likes talking about her shame too. And also I have a problem with her saying being denied, like being denied by who? At no point does she pinpoint any specific person or community or, you know, source of this denial.
Oh, very vague. That's the other thing is like I feel like it does really remind me of going back and looking at videos of Amber Heard, because it is the same kind of lots of big platitudes and she keeps using all these like catchy words and everything, but like I feel like I don't actually have a clue about anything specifically that she said. Like there was nothing specifically even about, it's supposed to be a speech about like art too and connection between art and your social activism, but again, like there was no, I don't know, it was very, very strange. And even, you know, and even a lot of her like movements and stuff I found to be really sort of, it felt very sort of jacked up in a way, and I'm not saying that she was on something or.
Yeah, I have a few examples of like previous appearances when she was definitely a lot more feminine. She's always had this sort of a bit more of a masculine attitude in the way she carries herself, or I don't really want to call it masculine, but you can tell she wasn't entirely gender conforming. So it's not something she just made up later in life. I'm not claiming that, but she's definitely emphasizing that aspect of her personality here, and she's going out of her way to come across as a queer person would be expected to come across. I don't know if she's ever referred to herself as queer, but that's one of those very vague terms that I think interesting. So I really enjoyed your first philosophy video and the second one too, but in the first one, you talked about the work of this philosopher, Baudrillard, and this connection between the signified and the signifier when we talk about symbols and what symbols represent. And I mentioned the word queer, and that's how I thought about it, but I think this is very relevant to this conversation because the word queer is one of these phrases that has just become this symbol, this signifier with not much substance behind it. And I don't think many people dare question what it even means. And I'm not sure if Evan Rachel Wood has ever referred to herself as queer, but there's a sort of image she seems to really try to live up to in this talk. And I think Your discussion of the signified and signifier is also very relevant to sexual harassment allegations, and we might end up talking more about this a bit later, but it seems to me that a lot of what she says in interviews, in talks, in her testimonies is focused so much on the signifier and presenting her message in a way that makes it impossible for anyone to even question, to even ask what those claims actually mean. There's just not much substance behind it if you dare to try to push past those labels, those words she uses. Even something as vague as shame. You know, what does that mean and where does it come from? At the end of the day, it is your emotion. And there was this essay that she published in Nylon magazine that we'll probably talk a bit about later, but in that one, she makes it very clear that emotions are produced in our minds, and we are very much in control, or should be. A healthy person should be in control of their thoughts and emotions. And I agree with her on that completely. So I just find it strange that a lot of the time she talks in this very passive voice, and she says she was denied a voice, as you pointed it out. And you know, what does that mean? Denied by who? And then she says, well, what really bothers me about her message here is that she makes such a big deal out of being bisexual, and I really don't think it is. So she's 4 years older than me, but I believe the US has always been at least a few years ahead of Hungary. And growing up in a small town in Hungary, it was just never such a big deal. You know, I might not have wanted to openly hold hands with a girl in the street or kiss a girl, but I knew I could have done that in the capital city, maybe not in my small hometown. And certainly everyone in my high school knew what bisexual meant at the age of 14 or 15. So I just don't really understand what she wants us to believe at this point. She's really presenting herself as this very naive, fragile little princess who was locked up in this tower. And in a way she was, because she was homeschooled, which is quite a relevant piece of information, because she was clearly shielded from the world in many ways. And I think that had a huge impact in this victim mentality that she developed later in life. And then she talks about competition of suffering, being denied the right to suffer. And before we go back to the beginning, because I want to ask you about some of this stuff, but one thing I really wanted to point out is her quoting Nina Simone, who was a Black woman in the Jim Crow South, struggling with real, very, very real racism and discrimination. So how dare she compare her struggle to the struggles of Nina Simone? The only thing they have in common, they're from the same town or the same state. They're both from North Carolina, so that's probably the reason why she mentioned her. But I just find it so obnoxious. And then she talks about how this is a crucial time and every day is a matter of survival. And then she quotes this woman who had to go through extreme struggles to accomplish what she accomplished. I mean, just how dare she talk that way? And how come no one calls her out on this and they applaud her? Like, how come a crowd of people goes along with this? It's just, I don't know, it is complete lunacy the way I see it. So
you made so many good points there. I love what you said. This could be like you could do a whole video on this, on just the idea of how the signifiers, how words are being used now, overused or used in such ways so that we don't ever really know what people are referring to. It's just kind of, so I was denied my voice, and that, and so that signifier of denied, like that has a big effect on us. Oh my gosh, she's being silenced. She's being, she's marginalized or whatever. I think it's interesting friends who homeschool. I'm not even critiquing it. I'm just saying one aspect of homeschooling, especially if you're not very conscious about not doing that, is that, it is a certain kind of sheltering or limited perspective on the world. But on the other hand, it sounds like her parents were really into sort of pushing her in this theater stuff. I'm not saying she didn't want to do it or whatever, but the kind of a work ethic that it seems like she had or had to have when she was a child, and also the fact that her parents were, her okay with her doing edgier things and stuff. I guess what I'm saying is, I think that someone like this, and I can speak from my own personal experience in a different way, but I think that for people like this, where there's a real dichotomy between, on the one hand, like sort of being sheltered in some way, and then on the other, like having some stuff in your life that's very out there when you're growing up. I think that I think she's got a kind of a split going on in some ways, and I don't think she really knows who she is. And so you see it in these different iterations in her life, where when she's dating Manson, then she's just, we'll talk about it more, right? But she's projecting this image of like, I'm really dark and, stuff like that. And then now that she's dating who she's dating now, it's a whole other thing. So those are some really good points, for sure.
But it's interesting what you brought up about her parents pushing her to do these things, because in the first video I showed, she specifically says that she started acting when she was 5, and her mom would take her to shoot castings and shoot and all that. Which she's proud to say that, obviously, because her career has turned out quite well. She has become a professional actress, so she's obviously grateful to her mom for that. But again, I just get these Persephone vibes from her. It's literally her mother just shaping the course of her life, and then other people, and shaping the course of her life. And that's what she says in this talk. She actually says that she was, that's another, there's an interview, I think, she's talking about how she was trained to surrender control to other people. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what she's saying. And I think her upbringing had a huge role to play in this. And yet she has so much gratitude for her parents for shaping her life this way. So there seem to be a lot of conflicting feelings there. Because when she first started dating Manson, she was saying that she wanted danger. She specifically said she wanted danger and freedom. Mm-hmm. And that she couldn't really handle that danger and freedom.
And the fact that even if it turned out well for her, that she started working at age 5, and even if that was a good decision on her mother's part, might very well have been, our parents' part, might very well have been, but that is so extremely young developmentally. And I just wonder, I just think it might say some interesting things, good and bad, but to think of someone who is, you're still supposed to be in the sort of just the kind of developing, playing stage. And I know that theater, that stuff is it's a kind of play, but at the same time, I don't know what it does to your psyche to be on camera so much at that early age, because there is a kind of a narcissism, and this isn't any big news flash to people, that actors and performers tend to be more narcissistic, but there is a kind of a relationship between kind of a narcissism. And I just wonder, at age 5, you're doing that and you're getting all this attention on you for pretending to be things that you're not. I just don't know what that does to you, but maybe that's too extreme on my part.
It's easy to think of examples of people who were really messed up by like Michael Jackson is probably one example, although one could argue that he had such an extreme amount of fame later in life, it might not have even made such a huge difference as he started so early.
Yeah. And his dad was super abusive. His dad would beat the shit out of stuff. So, and anyway, and we're not even trying to say that, like, I don't think that she had an abusive upbringing or whatever, but just that it's just interesting if you're analyzing someone who we believe is making false and contradictory claims about Manson, and then and analyzing how she seems to have evolved over the years in a way that it raises questions. And like you said, things that she says that don't make sense. You want to show another clip, or do you have something?
Actually, yeah, let's look at the self interview, the stool one.
I sort of gave up autonomy over my body and my image and my wants and just tailored them to whoever I was with, because that's what I was sort of trained to do. And so you start to go, okay, but what about me? Like, what about who I am and what about what I want? And I think because I did well in my career, no one wanted to hear about my problems. And so I kept them all in. That then sort of segued into much more dangerous self-destructive behavior later on in life. Remember when I first, started to have sexual encounters, I wouldn't let anybody take my shirt off because I was like ashamed of my body. Like, when you really think about that, like, what a sad thing. It's your fucking body. It's so great. It can do so many things. Like, it's there to enjoy. And like, I couldn't even like share it with my most intimate partner. And that, that was sad. But I knew that I liked girls. I think when I was 12 is when it really hit me to the point where I thought I was gonna have a panic attack. Where it was like, oh no. But I still hadn't come out of the closet yet. So I still didn't really get that there was a reason why I was always sporty spice. I think in high school, I learned about bisexuality and I thought, oh, wait, that's allowed? The difference that would have made in my life if I had been able to grow up and just like whoever I liked and had more of an understanding of what I was feeling. And I still really wasn't like having relationships with girls. That didn't really happen until later in life. I was like, okay, I know this is a part of me. I really haven't explored it fully, and I want to do that. So that's what I did. And I got my best pair of Doc Martens, and I moved to the Lower East Side in New York and, had a great time just discovering who I was and, immersing myself in the queer community and feeling what that was like and feeling like I had found my tribe, but then also feeling like my tribe was slightly against me because I was bi. And even though I didn't have language for that, I felt it. And I knew that no one was really seeing me. I'm very confident in my sexuality now, and it did change, again, my relationship to my body because I could let go of a lot of shame. I think we don't realize how much shame has an effect on our body and our sexuality and our confidence and our mental health.
Wow. Well, I'm curious what you feel. I have several things. There are a couple of things that I thought were actually kind of jaw-dropping, one in particular. But what do you think? What did you notice?
Well, one thing that really stands out is how she talks about how she was trained to tailor herself to whoever she was with. And that's one of her big allegations against Manson, that she was forced to dress in a certain way. So was she actually forced to do that? And trained by who? She doesn't make it very clear. By her parents, by her extended family, by her environment in the film industry. Again, and then shame. Again, shame can manifest in so many different ways. Like, what does this shame actually look like? Because I can't really put my finger on it. Like, based on the way she's discussing it, it's not really getting across to me what she actually means by the shame. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that the quote about being trained, I think that what's interesting and what came right before that, I think, there's this idea in psychoanalytic theory that when we speak, often we're saying one thing, but that's not right. But what we're really saying has a lot of truth in it. And if you look at her words and you forget about Manson or the idea of domestic abuse that she's really interested in, but just what she says, I gave up autonomy over my body. I became whoever I was with. That's what I'm trained to do. In a psychoanalytic sense, what she's basically describing is a problem on her part, where she feels like, or unconsciously she feels she's forced to mimic who she's with. I mean, that's a sign. That can be a sign, as a personality disorder. And I'm not diagnosing her, but I'm just saying that she's kind of giving something away interesting there, because she thinks that she's blaming Manson or whoever these people are that she's accusing. Or referring to in this, but in fact, she's describing herself. And when she said, what I was trained to do, To me, that's almost kind of an indication of what we've been talking about, that the idea that she's been an actress from the earliest age, and that you can, and that she probably gained a lot of her like esteem and stuff, her self-worth, and how well she could portray characters. And so kind of how I read it in a deeper, like, unconscious or psychoanalytic sense, is that this person recognizes on some level that they do have a problem where they basically mimic whoever they're with, and that it is something that from an early age they were trained to do, but just not in the way that she's thinking of it. And so what she does when you see her with Manson, and she's basically trying to be a Dita Von Teese copycat, with that whole elegant sort of 40s look, whatever. And then you see her then when she's dating Jamie, or she's with Jamie Bell, and pictures of them where they look almost identical. And then when you see her with who she's apparently with now, or you see what she looks like and how she's presenting herself now that she is dating a woman, it's very interesting so that's one thing. And then the other thing is when she said she was describing this sort of awakening, this bisexual awakening, and finding her community, finding the LGBTQ community. But this is interesting. She said, I found my tribe, but I felt they were rejecting of me in some ways. Like, she's got a grievance she's one of those grievance people. And so, that can also be a sign of a personality disorder, I hate to say, but somebody who is kind of constantly like at odds with people around them. And so basically what she's now complaining about is that as a bisexual, I wasn't fully embraced by the lesbian community. It's just, it's very suspicious.
She's everyone's victim. And
That's right.
I don't even think she has a personality disorder. I just think she doesn't have a personality. And I think, well, she does seem to treat herself, I refer to herself as this blank slate, who's just painted by outside influences, and then rejected by those same influences, and just being blown about in the wind through life.
Did she use that term in an earlier interview, or am I imagining that? Tabula rasa? Did she say that at one point? Blank slate?
She might have said tabula rasa.
I think she said, which is blank slate. That's really interesting that you said that, or because anyway, I'll go back and take a look at that, but that's interesting.
And I think I have nothing against the LGBT community.
Right.
I fully support gay rights. I just want to make that clear.
Right.
But I think it is very much a magnet for people who struggle with their identity, who feel like they don't really fit in anywhere. And that's a good thing. In many cases. And I think that's what happened in her case too. There are people who are just so desperate to feel like they belong somewhere. And she's using words like tribe, which is a very interesting word. When you're a member of a tribe, you're obviously in a community with people who share your values, share your sense of identity. And that's clearly what she was yearning for. And she's been trying to find that identity in so many different places, running away with Manson, and then, she was with Jamie Bell before and after Manson. And then there was this other guy, I'm just looking at her Wikipedia page, Zach Villa, who's another rock singer, I think, who has this more of a punk look. So when she was, again, we can bring up some pictures. When she was dating this guy, it looked like they were using the same hair dye and things like that. So it could be a sign of narcissism. But again, I just get this extreme innocence from her, and she's embracing this innocence and fragility within herself. And it seems like she's so desperate to feel safe, and then she's in such shock when she doesn't actually feel safe next to someone like Manson.
Yeah, well, I was thinking, less of a narcissism in this case, or I think that I do think she genuinely feels these things. I think more like a sign of a borderline personality, where they just have an unstable sense of identity, and they basically latch on to or become whoever they're dating, which I think is one of Amber Heard's issues. I don't know, but again, I know there's only so far that sort of diagnosing people it can get us. That's not what I'm trying to do. I think more what we're trying to get at is that there is something, whatever you want to call it, there's something going on here with her. And I don't know if she has these up anymore, but I've seen pictures that she had posted in the past on her Instagram of the scars from self-cutting. You can still find them online. And not that I think there's anything wrong at all with being honest about your problems and trying to help others who have those problems. But there was a kind of even the way the shot was done, the picture, there was a kind of a wallowing in it, or it's kind of aestheticizing or something. There was something very strange about it. And I got the sense that she that she enjoys putting this stuff out there. And then there are pictures out there of her crying and stuff like that I don't know.